The fate of our hero began well. In his past life, he smiled at luck. He was surrounded by love and respect. For everyone there comes a different hour, and for our hero, it is time to leave this world and go to another dimension. At his rebirth, he realized his new mission. To become a great hero, to begin an amazing adventure in a wonderful world full of mysteries and endless possibilities. However, fate turned out differently. He became a simple, rusted sword, forgotten and neglected after his rebirth. The only thing it remembered was its name, Fan. As time passed, the young man reconciled himself to the sword's new essence, feeling that his fate had become insignificant by residing in this wretched guise. In the guise of a sword, he continued to wait for his master, believing that whoever it was, that person would accept him. As the sword made the decision to accept its master, a guy began to approach him, breathing heavily. It was obvious from his face that he had been in fights before. The guy kept coming closer and closer, his footsteps sounding distinct. Fan decided to serve the new hero with loyalty and truth, promising not to betray him ever. The guy running away from the crowd was named Tianyi. He was seriously wounded and was losing a lot of blood, having trouble breathing. One of the men chasing him warned that Tianyi had little time left because of the poison dart that had hit him. Running to the platform where the sword was bricked up, the young man turned his attention to it, deciding to use it as his last chance to save his life. Fang realized that perhaps this was his new master, and now he would cease to be a useless piece of metal, becoming a truly valuable thing, his own soul. The young man approached resolutely and drew his sword, retrieving it from the stone, preparing for the battle on which his life depended. When the young man retrieved the sword, Fang had an alert. The system had been successfully activated, and a new master had been found. After activating all the systems, our hero appeared from the sword and was sealed there. He was wearing beautiful clothes decorated with ornaments, and a bright light was beaming around him, as if testifying to his new birth and finding meaning in this world. After being released from the sword, Fan was astonished. He had a body and could now speak. While Fang rejoiced in his new state, the new sword wielder was on his last breath, his strength drained. The poison was acting much faster than he had expected. At first, Fang was getting used to his release and decided to see who his new master would be, who he would serve. He turned around and took a closer look at his new owner. As he flew up to him, Fang began to ponder on what mission his new master would give him. His thoughts swirled with all sorts of ideas, but one thing he was sure of was that he would follow his new master everywhere and would follow any orders. While his master was barely on his feet and shaking, Fang got excited and began to speak. "You should know how long I've been waiting for you. Let us unite as one team." But at this moment, Fang's new master had other problems. Fang looked more and more closely at his new master and noticed the old clothes he was wearing. He realized that he was in a strange and ancient world. At this moment of reflection, I reached the heart of Fang's new master. Just a moment later, Tianyi let out his last breath, releasing the sword from his hands and falling to the ground. His body collapsed lifelessly without making a sound after falling. The sword that had been released earlier was floating in the air and was already heading towards the ground, aiming for a fall. Upon landing, the sword hit Tian, and our sword system recorded that the swordmaster was killed by this sword. Fan couldn't understand how this could have happened. He felt guilty, unable to protect his master. After a while, the very people who were chasing Tianyi came running in. Fang had no choice but to just watch all this happening. One of the pursuers noticed that Tian was already lying on the ground, was shocked to see his breathless body with a beautiful sword in his chest. One of the leading members of the company that was pursuing Tianyi came up. He declared that the rascal had died from poison, saying that he was supposed to. Fan waved his hand at this time, pondering, the master couldn't have died so easily. He was saddened that he had seemingly just found a new master, but their time together had passed so quickly. After inspecting Tianyi's body in detail, the man hesitated when he saw the sword sticking out of his body. The spirit of the sword was grieving over its dead master. It was saddened by the fact that it seemed that Tianyi had killed himself. An idea came to Fang and he decided to test it out. Since he now had no master but was still in spiritual form, he began waving his arms and shouting, trying to see if anyone would hear him. He wanted to see if he was still present in this world or not. As he flew up to each one, he tried to draw their attention to him, talking, but no one reacted. The men continued to discuss speculation about the cause of Tianyi's death, thinking that he could not bear the pain of the poison and had committed suicide. He was frustrated that no one reacted to his presence at all. It was even more upsetting than the loss of his master, which had just happened. It saddened him indeed, the pointlessness of this rebirth. He couldn't communicate with people, couldn't see how the story would unfold. He didn't want to live another useless life, devoid of meaning and purpose. A group of people who had been following Tianyi approached his body and began discussing his death. They thought his suicide was horrible and suggested that he was a complete sucker. One of them fearfully remarked, "Look at his sword. Even the hilt is covered in rust. It hasn't been used in a long time. How worthless he was." Fan fell into despair. Not only was he inside the sword, but now he was even more despised. He wanted to make sense of this new life, but it seemed that dying would be easier. A little while later, our hero felt better, and other people noticed that something strange was happening to the sword. Ours too decided to see what was going on. The sword that had previously stabbed into Tianyi began to consume his soul, leaving the wielder with nothing of that soul. Our hero saw the notification that the soul was fully incarnated, and he received 100 evolution points. After being absorbed, the sword began to evolve from an ordinary longsword into a Soul Eater sword. During this evolution, he felt a huge increase in strength. After that, the Soul Eater sword was picked up by its new master, and looking at it, Wang Ba was upset. He was upset that he had become the new master of this sword. Wang Ba was a rather old man with gray hair and beard, but he was glad to have such an excellent sword. Our hero looked at him in disgust, realizing that he was just an old man. "He has taken possession of me, but his fate will probably be short," thought the hero. After all, his sword would see many more new masters. Such is the fate of the sword. In this world, wars are highly respected, and there are 8 empires. The empire in which our hero is located is called the Tianba Empire. Among the many warriors, there are both weak and strong warriors. The weakest were considered quasi-warriors, who had 9 ranks. They were followed by warrior kings, saints, and even gods of war. Outside the urban areas, there was complete chaos, darkness, and horror. There were terrible and dangerous spirits rampaging about, threatening ordinary people. Fan began to understand the system, and learned that the divine sword absorbed the souls of these monsters to gain evolution points, while the swordmaster could also receive rewards and gain new skills when killing these creatures. The higher the level of the sword, the stronger the swordmaster himself becomes. He thought about the fact that he had absorbed the soul of his former master, and the question of what the divine sword could make of it worried him. As soon as our hero became the owner of the sword, the characteristics of the previous owner became available to him. It turned out to be a second-level warrior who had rather meager interests: money, girls, and animals. Raising the sword above his head, the hero pondered that this legendary sword, capable of absorbing souls, would make him a famous warrior and open all the doors of success before him. His associates surrounded him, congratulating him on becoming cooler and stronger. He rejoiced more and more, but he was beginning to be overcome with pride. Fang was getting harder and harder to bear. It was even starting to affect him physically. He didn't want his new master to become stronger. Watching his master, he began to feel frustrated and wondered how he could become stronger himself to earn more rewards and learn new skills. The only conclusion he came to was that he needed to absorb more and more souls. At this point, one of the new sword owner's allies noticed the gruesome scene and started shouting, "Boss, look at this! Look at this!" Pointing at what he saw, Wang Ba turned around and was completely distressed. Our hero just stood there, his face expressing no emotion. They watched as the red-eyed wolf ate one of their comrades, feeling horrified. This monster was a level 3 monster and had tremendous strength. In the next instant, he tore one of his allies in 2, showing his superiority over all those poor people. After completing one victim, he began to choose the next, looking intently at everyone in the vicinity. Before attacking, he would let out an unbearably loud roar, displaying his power in front of everyone present so that they would feel fear. This infernal sound spread throughout the forest. One of the minions of the new sword owner trembled, claiming that this would be the end for everyone. The others assured him that there was no need to be afraid, for they had this divine sword. Our hero also showed confidence and said, "Don't be afraid, you have me. Everything will end well." Wang Ba rushed into the fight, shouting that it was just an ordinary beast that would soon go to hell. Our hero stood behind him, grinning and wishing him good luck and victory. After Wang Ba started to distance himself, Fan felt something strange. The next moment, he began to be drawn back to the sword, and he realized he couldn't get far away from it. He asked his new master to not engage so actively in the fight, so that he could do something to help him. Wang Ba struck a precise blow right into the mouth of this predator to deprive it of its main weapon, its fangs. After a while, he swung his sword with a precise strike right at that beast, shouting, "Don't you dare underestimate me. I am strong and experienced." The wolf was hit right in the mouth. Upon receiving this unexpected blow, the wolf recoiled to devise a new plan of attack. Wang Ba grinned on the offensive, saying that this was all a level 3 beast could do, and added, "You are as weak as a hamster." The beast could not bear these words, and attacked Wang Ba, leaping and opening its wounded mouth. it rushed with the intention of devouring its opponent, while Wang Ba, fully confident of his victory, shouted, "I'll straight away slash you with my sword. You are just the next step towards my greatness as a warrior." After Wang Ba made a decisive strike and defeated the third-level beast, Fan began to feel proud of his new master, exclaiming, "Wow, I feel like I have a special and strong new master." After defeating this monster, points for this red-eyed wolf began to be absorbed. 300 evolution points were credited. At this moment, Wang Ba was rejoicing in his victory, shouting that he was invulnerable. His subordinate was also cheering him on. When the young man decided to take a look at the points he had accumulated, he wondered where he could spend them and what skills he could acquire through it. In the skills window, he found one option that interested him, the movement skill. The description went something like this: use evolution points and gain the ability to move. He wondered, movement, that means I can be independent. Deciding quickly, he chose the movement skill, hoping to find a caring and beautiful mistress instead of the grumpy old man named Wang Ba. After spending 100 evolution points to acquire the movement skill, the sword began to behave strangely and just pounded. Wang Ba noticed this and was extremely surprised. The shaking of the sword meant that the movement skill was fully activated. But then a sign appeared in front of the hero, indicating that there were not enough evolution points to continue using the skill. He was disheartened by this. At the same moment, Wang Ba looked at the sword and pondered. Perhaps he started moving because of the recognition. Sometimes the system might provide an option to trade evolution points for skills, rather than just using them to acquire skills. The hero was disappointed that he had not been told about this possibility earlier. He would have been happy if the system had some sort of manual available to explain how this system works. After our hero exchanged the last 200 points for new skills, the new owner had already sensed something mysterious in the sphere's behavior. Contemplating my sword with deep attention, I noticed that the key of this weapon had become much more powerful. The next day, Wanpa entered an exquisite city of peace and harmony. People wandered carelessly through the streets, bearing their burdens and simply enjoying the captivation of life. Wang Ba entered one of the buildings hung with various symbols and patterns like a labyrinth of secret messages. Inside this structure sat a man with a mustache, calmly enjoying his tea and grinning. He asked, "How are you doing in our business?" Wang Ba raised his head to Tianyi and happily said, "This is exactly the development you wished for, wasn't it?" The man gazed into his head and began to ask questions about what it really was about Tianyi and what could have happened to him. He continued to talk about the forbidden secret that no one was supposed to know. The next day he took his sword to one of the great smiths and arms dealers. In search of a suitable sheath, he approached the merchant, who scrutinized the blade and noticed that it was too sharp, making it difficult to find a suitable sheath for such an exquisite weapon. Fan heard all this talk and was proud, for his sword was not forged by the hands of a blacksmith, but was simply born magnificent. At this time, Wang Ba, full of pride, instantly snatched the sword from the merchant's hands, saying, "You can't even make a scabbard for it. What kind of useless merchant are you?" Intrigued, the merchant asked who created this sword, who forged it. As he left, Wang Ba only said that he wasn't going to answer his questions. Leaving the forge, he was spotted by one of his subordinates who exclaimed, "Boss, there you are! I was so worried about you!" However, Wang Ba did not feel happy to meet this man. He simply waved a bag of money in his direction, saying, "Here is your money. Now don't waste my time and get out of here." After opening the bag and pouring out all the coins, he began to count them. It turned out to be such a small amount that the people around him even began to show irritation towards Wang Ba. These men began to count all the coins he had given them, convinced that there must be some mistake. However, after counting and making sure that there were no mistakes, their resentment did not subside. They were angry because their fellow citizens had died and Wang Ba had given them such a small amount of coins. Fan was also annoyed by the whole situation. He realized that people had been hurt in this matter, and Wang Ba was acting like a rascal. At this time, Wang Ba was enjoying fun with the girls. Our hero approached him to see what was going on. He noticed a candle burning on the table and came even closer. Seeing Wang Ba enjoying fun with the girl, our hero realized that his master wasn't doing anything useful at all. He seemed to be focused only on his own miserable and base pleasures. Looking at all of his master's actions, he realized that Wang Ba was thrilled to meet a third-level warrior. However, Fan also felt saddened that his master was still able to make a contract with such a person. After a few moments, he suddenly heard a strange sound and started yelling, "Who's here? Come out!" Fan thought, was he really able to spot me? Was he able to see me? In fact, Tianjin approached him with the intention of stealing his sword. Wang Ba, noticing him, started yelling at him, claiming that he was preventing him from enjoying this beautiful night. Tianjin was furious that he had been cheated. They had agreed to pay exactly 100 gold coins, but Wang Ba had only handed over an extremely small portion of the promised amount. Now he had come to take revenge and kill him, as well as take possession of everything he had been promised. After this quick dialogue, Tianjin began to strike at Wang Ba. However, Wang Ba managed to dodge and threatened Tianjin to put his sword down and hurriedly leave if he wanted to keep his life. However, our hero was more happy to see Tianjin as the master, and he supported him with all his might. He even urged him to overpower himself. To make it clear that Tianjin was taking the wrong path, Fan used his motion control skill. Tianjin, realizing that the sword in his hands was beginning to tremble, began to realize that he had taken the wrong path and began to act more decisively. Fan began to encourage Tianjin, telling him to show him his strength and make him hand over his sword. However, Tianjin was much stronger, even without the sword, and delivered a devastating blow to Fan. From the force of this blow, Tianjin flew out through the door. Our hero realized that he was still too weak to fight Wang Ba. After Tianjin landed and lay in a puff of dust and dirt, Wang Ba approached him and remarked, "So you decided to challenge me with your low level? You must have decided to commit suicide here, young one." In response, Tian said, "I am not here today to die. I came for the good purpose of avenging the death of my wife as well." At this moment, Wang Ba smiled and said, "Did you really come to avenge me for this stubborn woman? You know, she was great in bed." Fan and Tianjin were shocked by these words, and Wang Ba continued to annoy them with his behavior. At this moment, Fan realized that as long as the sword's true master was alive, only he could use it. The sword master was Wang Ba, and Fan remembered that the system also mentioned that the sword master was given additional characteristics. That was why Wang Ba was so strong. Clenching his fist, Fang accepted that as long as his current master was alive, he had every right to use the sword as he saw fit. He realized that even if he had his own skills, not using the sword as his main weapon meant he had no chance of winning. At this moment, Tianzi began to lose blood and he didn't have long to live. Fan noticed this and began to think about how he could help him. After opening his system, Fan began to search for anything that could help Tianzi. He frantically searched for ways to provide assistance. He found one of the skills, Blood Soul. This skill absorbs essence from blood and briefly strengthens the one who holds the sword. The blood splashed onto the sword and began to activate this skill. Tianzi didn't understand what was happening to him right now. His eyes turned scarlet and he felt a surge of strength within him that he hadn't had before. He looked at the sword and began to think that perhaps it was only because of him. He struck Wang Ba quite hard. He was shocked by such a burst of strength from such a weak young man. Fan began to whisper, "Jin, don't you wish to gain true strength together with me?" The one stood and listened, realizing that this was his only option. Wang Ba didn't understand what was happening. Why did he become stronger just now? Fan continued, "You know what to do." At this moment, Tianjin began to inflict wounds on himself to activate the skill. Tianzi began to pour blood onto the sword, thus activating the Blood Soul skill. The more blood he transferred to the sword, the more power he would receive. Fang stood over him and said, "Strength. I'll give you all the strength I can myself. You will be able to defeat him." He watched as Tianjin grew stronger, thinking that perhaps that person had already lost his mind. However, this was just using a skill. After Tianjin gained strength, he began to attack Fan Ba with the words, "I may be crazy, but there is only one thing waiting for you. Death by my hand." Fan was also encouraged by this young man's determination and thought that they had a chance. Tianjin started throwing punches at Wang Ba, but he managed to dodge. However, this was still not enough. Wang Ba was many times stronger than Tianjin, even with his enhancement. Without much effort, he dealt a crushing blow to him. Tianjin, unable to withstand such a blow, flew back into the weapon rack. It was hard for him to breathe, hard for him to move. He was completely crippled and had not expected such strength from an old man. Wang Ba walked up to him, and the man bent down to spit all his blood out of his mouth before he began to speak. "You're just ordinary trash. How could you even think you could beat me?" After that, he continued to say what he heard. "You have a younger sister. Yes, she's as beautiful as your wife. We'll have to pay her a visit." Such words did not please Fan, and he crouched down, condemning Wang Ba for being so gloomy. Gritting his teeth, Fang thought that his current master was a real filthy animal. There was nothing human left in him, let alone culture. In order to finish off the current master, FAI began to activate another one of his skills. It was the Phantom Dance skill, which gave him even more strength. After activating the Phantom Dance, Tianjin literally couldn't stand in one place and began to attack. Swinging his sword, he shouted the name of the person he wanted to defeat. It was the only person at the moment. what you have done. None of your dirty deeds will be forgotten, he ranted. Screaming, he started throwing punches that came straight at Wang Ba's body. Wang Ba couldn't dodge all these punches and just stood there in shock. His entire body from his head to his feet was completely shattered. There were so many blows that no part of his body was left unharmed. After the Swordmaster died, Fang had an alert saying, "The Swordmaster has died. Soul absorption will gain 200 evolution points." He also noticed that this skill was too harsh, and Phantom Dance should be used in the most extreme cases. After the death of the previous owner, the sword began to change in the hands of the new owner. Tianjin was giddy with happiness, for he had come to know what the Divine Sword was. This was the power he had been missing so much. Fan looked at the alerts and didn't understand what was going on here. Most likely the death of a Swordmaster gives an achievement, and there was something wrong with this system. After all, he had obtained the Unknown Sword achievement. Xianzhen was rejoicing at this moment. After all, he had gotten through and was finally able to avenge all of Wang Ba's dirty deeds. He was starting to go crazy holding the sword. He spoke to it. "With you, I can achieve anything I want. As long as I have this sword, no one can stop me anymore." His red eyes and the smirk on his face showed that he was already out of his mind. After that, Tian approached a building. This building turned out to be a dungeon that was guarded by a single sleeping guardian. When he got closer to him, he threw the same bag of money Wang Ba had given him earlier. The sleeping guard became alert and waited, also suspecting that this strange man would ask for something. However, Tian asked him to sell only those prisoners who were sentenced to death. The guard was happy that he would get the money so easily, because no one would even remember about these prisoners. They began to enter the prison together so that the guard could show him where these very prisoners were. Walking forward a little, the guard said, "Please follow me. I'll show you where all those people you're so interested in are." However, Tianjin only had one goal: to increase his characteristics. He had personally killed all the prisoners who had been sentenced to death himself, raising his sword level and his characteristics. The guard looked at him and thought, "This guy is actually crazy. They would have been killed anyway. Why would he do such a thing?" After that unusual night, Fang looked at his new master and thought that he seemed to have calmed down. He was behaving differently now, not like when he slaughtered the prisoners sentenced to death. He began to wonder why his temperament had changed. It was probably because of the task he was given: kill 20 people to unlock the skill achievement Evil Chi. This skill was that the blade exuded an evil aura that affected people. The owner of the sword who had a weak mind would be affected by it. It also had the ability to intimidate the enemy. At this moment, Tian noticed something outside of his house. He moved there with lightning speed, shouting, "Who's there? Who managed to disturb me?" However, Fang was not happy about this, for he could not move far away from the sword. He shouted, "Hey, wait! Not so fast, I haven't finished everything yet." "Slow down, please. Come on, you be slower," Fan asked, trying to get Tian to stop. After Fang saw the opening, he would have to leak through. He started shouting, "No, wait for me. Wait for me to crush this roof, and you'll be left without your strength." He jumped down and in front of him saw a man who said he had heard that Van Ba had been defeated by a man who had taken the Divine Sword. The person who came to see our young man was Zhang Hu. He was the leader of the Assault Tiger mercenaries. Looking at the sword, he said that calling this sword divine was just an exaggeration. His henchmen began to cheer him up, telling Tian to give up all his belongings. Zhang Hu himself was saying, "Kid, and you know that killing people is bad." He asked him to hand over his sword and all the gold coins he had taken, in which case he might even let him go. However, Tianjin wouldn't listen to him and sent him to hell. He wasn't going to look at the person who just started attacking him. Our hero knew that Zhang Hu was stronger than Wang Ba and should not have underestimated him. Smiling, Zhang Hu uttered, "You are indeed a funny guy, deciding to part with your life so easily." A fight broke out, and Zhang Hu easily deflected the blows of Tian, who unsuccessfully tried to land his punches. In response, Zhang Hu began to attack, displaying incredible strength even with all the skills he had acquired. The sword, as well as its wielder, Mi, appeared to be overly traumatized, literally from a single swing of Zhang Hu's sword. Tian looked at the sword that had cracks appearing on it, and with a shake in his hands he uttered, "Divine Sword. This is a divine sword. How was it able to repel my strike so easily?" Wang was pondering at this time. "I'm going to break everything right now. Let's finish this quickly." The moment Tian was trembling with the sword in his hands, Zhang Hu approached him and asked him to give up his sword, to die a warrior's honorable death. However, Tian was unwilling to give up easily. He began to shout, calling for the divine sword to transfer its power to him. He was still striving to overpower his enemy. "Fine, realizing the urgency of the situation, began researching skills that could help his current owner. Realizing that inaction would lead to his end, he decided to use all of his evolution points to acquire the necessary skills. However, he didn't have time because it took time to use the skill. He got a sign that said, "The skill is recharging. Wait 15 seconds." However, this was not enough time, and Tian was killed by Zhang Hu. After that, another sign appeared, indicating that several more deaths of swordmasters were needed to open the unknown sword skill. Fan looked at all of this with grief. Was it really his fate to see all the young masters die in front of him? At this moment, Zhang Hu himself ordered him to watch over the house and the surrounding area, and to take away anything that seemed valuable. One of Zhang Hu's soldiers took the sword and began to scrutinize it, asking, "Boss, do you need this sword?" The boss replied that no, it wasn't as good as he thought it was and was just a trinket that he wouldn't need. Fan was deeply disappointed at being called just a trinket. Another associate of Zhang Hu noticed that the boss already had a higher-ranked sword. Why would he need this trash? He started biting this arrogant youngster, saying that he didn't understand anything. When the young man who took the sword realized that no one wanted the blade, he decided to take it for himself. Deciding that they could show everyone that the sword wasn't that bad at all, a new contract was made. This guy with hair named Ye Lan became the new owner of the sword. The next day, the usual household problems began. Ye Lan actively helped his companions, carried things to the barn as ordered by his elders, and simply tried to help everyone around him. After a hard day, Ye Lan would go for a walk in the evening. There were beautiful girls around him offering him entertainment. Fan didn't understand how he was going to become the strongest by doing what he was doing now. Fan was completely disappointed in his new master. He thought that it was all over. This guy was a total loser. The idea that he might have to serve some idiot for the rest of his life without ever accomplishing anything flickered through his mind. At this time, Ye Lan was just carefree wandering around the city. But for Fang, it was getting annoying. He wanted to know when this endless carefree wandering would end. Fan felt that his life had become meaningless, but then there was a shout when someone promised that the boss had an important announcement to make. Ye Lan perked up, because this could be an important moment to prove himself to the boss. Not only Ye Lan, but all the other members of the mercenary guild had gathered. The boss himself said, "My brothers, we have a harsh battle ahead of us. I expect you to perform splendidly in the battles." Everyone gathered around the boss as he sat down in his chair and began to tell the whole plan. Their plan was formidable, and they had decided to exterminate the shadow mercenaries who were interfering with their business. One of the boss's subordinates standing nearby bent over and said, "Maybe you'll change your mind. It could be dangerous." Immediately after saying those words, Zhang Hu slapped the one on the cheek with a loud expression. "You dare to defame me? Are you doubting all of us?" After that, he said that it was a mission prepared in advance, and he had already sent a spy there, so they didn't need to prepare. Everything would be completed that night. They started yelling, "Yeah, you wouldn't expect anything else from our boss. We can do it. We'll do it." Fang watched his new master practicing with his sword, making simple swings, and was frustrated that these movements promised no effect. After that, the very same associate of the boss came up to Ye Lan and shoved him. Ye Lan, upon seeing him, staggered and asked, "What do you want from me?" The guy who hit the new swordmaster offered to fight him. Fan noticed that this was just arrogant trash and decided that it was high time he showed who was the strongest here. But Ye Lan was too focused on achieving one goal, to keep improving. He talked himself out of paying attention to that guy. He continued to make his sword swings, which were of no use. Fang was frustrated at this time, thinking, well, you should at least swing a little harder to make it work. Fang was worried. After all, he was already starting to wonder if he would even be able to gain a couple evolution points with a new master, or if he would also remain one of the talentless swords. Fang was not given to the idea of killing his enemies in order to become famous. Instead, he dreamed of making a lot of money by working and giving a huge house to his mom. Fan looked at his new master and realized that now he at least had a more honest owner than the previous one, even if this new owner was less talented. During the training session, Fang started earning evolution points. This shocked him, because he didn't realize that even in such a ridiculous way, he could become stronger. He practiced harder and harder, repeating over and over again, get famous, make money, get famous, and make money. That was all he needed. Watching him, his new master agreed, "Okay, we'll work together now. I'll help you in any way I can." After training, night fell, and the boss and his team launched an attack on the opposing Shadow Guild. The boss announced that they would attack on command, and now needed to fully concentrate. His subordinates agreed, and quietly got further and further into the thicket of the opponent. However, The master was worried that his training efforts might have been in vain, and he might not succeed. Fan supported him. "What are you saying? Don't devalue us. We can do anything." After the twist, they began to hear their enemies warning each other against the wine, saying there was something wrong with it, and it wasn't worth drinking. The boss was pleased with this. Our plan worked. It worked. At this time, Yilan kept saying that he needed to make money to buy his mom a house. He pondered, "Do I need these battles? After all, if I die, all these dreams will be wasted." At that moment, he realized that no money was worth his life. He decided to find another way. Fang tried to stop him by negotiating. "What are you talking about? You're going to give up at the last moment. What kind of wimp are you?" He started looking at one of his fellow clansmen who started messing with him. "What are you looking at? Get out of here," the man said. Yilan asked, "What's wrong? What did I do to you again?" However, this guy stopped and said, "Just don't bother anyone." The boss began to rejoice that his plan had worked, asking his underlings, "So, what do you think of my secret ingredient? Did you all understand my plan?" Yilan still dared and dared to go into battle while holding his sword. He rubbed himself and repeated under his breath, "I don't need to be afraid. I don't need to be afraid. This is just an ordinary battle." Fang noticed that Yilan wouldn't survive with this attitude and thought about how he could help him. Smirking slightly, Fan began to apply his movement skill, thinking that this boy was lucky to like him. The sword in Yilan's hands began to tremble and he paid attention to it. Afterward, he pondered, "The sword has been trembling all this time. You're supporting me, right?" He cheered up when he saw that even the sword was backing him up. "All right, I'll do my best," he said. Fan also considered the fire in his eyes. "Geez," he kept saying, "there are no dirty tricks in war, and you only have yourself and your carelessness to blame for falling for such traps." After that, the boss said, "Guys, we don't wait. Let's all go on the attack right away. We must win." Fan and his new master were excited for their first real battle. Their blood was boiling. Here was the beginning of their great battle. Yilan immediately faced a rather challenging enemy, and they exchanged blows. Noticing that his master was giving up his position, Fan began to support him by applying a movement skill. Yilan was still able to fend off this enemy and deal a crushing blow to him. After that, a notification appeared that one level 1 warrior had been killed, causing them to gain 100 evolution points. Fang was shocked that his master was not so talentless. Fan began to cheer and support his new master. "Great job, you did well." He used a movement skill to show him that he was happy for him. Fan began to realize that it was finally time to earn points and get pumped for real. Warrior after warrior, he defeated everyone he could meet. His blows were ruthless and merciless, aimed at the weakest points of his enemies. Fan looked at all this and realized that his master was quite good, but he tried to warn him. If he killed too many enemies, he would start to be influenced by evil Qi. Fan was worried if he could withstand the influence and not go crazy. Here, just a moment later, Yilan launched himself into the battle with frenzied eyes. Fan realized that there was no way his master could withstand the evil Qi at all. He began to crush enemy after enemy. He began to smash enemy after enemy, head off the shoulders of everyone who got in his way. One of the enemies abruptly started attacking Yilan to avenge his brother who had died beforehand. He was hitting him, saying, "How dare you? That was my brother, the only one I could trust in this life." The blows struck Yilan with incredible force. After that, he kicked Yilan, throwing him far back. "I'm going again," that's how he shouted. "I will avenge my brother, he will not die for nothing." Yilan spoke, "Dream on the spot, however, I can't just die here." Fang looked that he now had enough points to activate the second skill, Phantom Dance. After activating the skill, the sword enveloped the country with a strong aura. Yilan began to repeat, "I will not die. I will live. I will not die. I will live." With this mindset, they started using the Phantom Dance skill to defeat the guy who came to avenge his brother. He used this skill, leaving many holes in the opponent's leg and defeating him. Afterward, our hero had a notification. "First-year warrior soul, I have been absorbed. 100 evolution points gained." Feng looked at it and pondered. Perhaps he had imagined it. But Yilan stood up much stronger. Yilan also noticed this and thanked his sword for his services. After that, Fan relaxed and took back his words. Now he didn't consider his new master a complete loser. At that time, the ringleader from the Shadow Mercenaries lifted his head up above all of theirs. The boss said Siren Honey and the Shadow Mercenaries were completely exterminated. All of his subordinates rejoiced at the victory, at the fact that they were able to reach the top. Ufa, below, there was an alert that you had reached the evolutionary conditions, and he decided to try to do it. After the evolution began, the sword was enveloped by a strong red, and the evolution began. It was given a C quality. Elan also noticed that the divine sword had started to evolve, and he was happy about it. However, Fang was saddened by the fact that after evolving, his clothes didn't even change, only his characteristics increased. After that, he came for his reward for this sword in battle. He defeated 6 men, and because of that he received 600 gold coins. As he received the money, he thought, yes, this is enough money to buy my mom a big house. I'll finally fulfill my dream. How could he suddenly show himself like this? Something's not right here. They wanted to follow him and find out all his secrets. Then they looked closely at his sword, wondering if it was the sword and not Elan himself. Alan didn't waste any time and began to train even harder with his sword to become even stronger. Yelan noticed that the sword seemed to have changed. He held it up and noted that it was coming off already, even stronger. He wondered if this was after he had killed all those enemies on the battlefield. One of the people watching was shocked by what he saw. Alan pondered. If his blade was so skillful, it might be worth trying different techniques, taking advantage of the new power he had gained. This new technique was a normal sword lunge. He hoped that with the strength he had gained, this move would become more effective. But even with the renewed vigor, this technique proved insufficient. The result was only a slightly raised dust, and he immediately sensed that something was wrong here. Taking the sword, he began to build up the power, thinking that perhaps the source of the power was simply insufficient. He gave more and more power to the sword, trying to make it stronger. His next attempt was more successful. The movements became more precise and graceful. Everything looked more majestic, and he felt it in every movement. Joy overwhelmed him, and he realized that more energy had to be invested to use more powerful techniques. However, such powerful blows quickly drained all his energy, and Elan fell to the ground, needing to rest. Lying down, he recognized that he was too tired. At the same time, he realized that self-improvement was not the easiest task, and more effort was needed to achieve significant results. At this time, one of the guys he met at the shop was watching him. He noticed that it wasn't just Elan, but the sword itself. Walking up to him, the other guy said, "I remembered where I saw this sword. We had a chance to get it." At this moment, they recalled how they had managed to steal the sword from Tianzin. However, they did not expect that this sword would prove to be so useful and powerful. Fang noticed that there were 2 guys watching Elan. He began to wonder that this did not bode well and that something unpleasant might be about to begin. At this time, Elan, who was lying on the ground, was approached and told that he was too relaxed, that he needed to work harder. Then they took his sack of money and said, "Look, this sack of money is no longer important to you because we are too kind to you. We are ready to exchange it for your sword, which is of no use to you." Elan was shocked by what was happening. He did not understand what decision to make. He stood there, frustrated, realizing that all of his money was his only fund he had, including the money he had received as a reward. He couldn't believe that these 2 men had just taken it all away from him like that. He also realized that their words were true. Weak people often resort to the most despicable methods. In an attempt to show his determination, Elan used his movement skills to show that they were now stronger and capable of showing these 2 weaklings that they had chosen the wrong path. Elan raged at them, looking them straight in the eye. He said, "This is my money. Give it back immediately." One of the guys grinned and said, "I have your money now, and it has become mine." Later he began to taunt Elan, saying, "You are arrogant, for you think you are strong only because of a sword." Elan could not tolerate this bullying for long and began to attack. He brought his sword right up to the forehead of the man who had grinned earlier. "Serious," he repeated. "Give me my money. I am saying this for the last time. After that, I will take action." Fan was amazed that Elan was talking to them at all. After all, in his opinion, all thieves deserve to die from the moment they were born. Elan brought the sword closer and closer to the forehead of this arrogant young man, hinting at his seriousness and willingness to act, pressing to understand his intentions. This guy asked his sidekick to help him attack Elan to teach him a lesson that you can't do that to them. Together they began attacking our young man in hopes of taking possession of the sword and leaving with a sack full of coins. Elan also wasted no time and rushed to attack his opponents. And this battle began, during which the 2 guys felt incredible pressure from Elan. Elan's punch was much stronger than their own attacks. He threw them far enough away, showing his advantage over them. After that, he did not stop and continued to fight because they had encroached on what was holy to him. He started attacking one of the guys, aiming to take away his ability to fight, attacking his arms and sword, trying to reduce his fighting ability. After hitting his shoulder, he also managed to dislodge his sword to completely suppress his opponent's desire to continue resisting. Noticing that the enemy was preparing to attack, he decided to get ahead of him and attack first. Elan attacked as fast as possible, and the opponent didn't expect such a swift attack. He tried to defend himself, Elan was able to knock the sword out of his opponent's hands and struck him when he was unarmed and in flight. The guy who attacked Elan was shocked that his weapon was chopped so easily. Elan brought his sword up to his forehead and said, "Don't blame me. You yourself refused to return my money and took what belongs to me." The man was shaking with fear, sensing that he might be killed. Earlier, he kept asking if he would get his money back. But now, with the sword to his forehead, Elan said, "Choose. Give me back everything that belongs to me, or I will deal with you." The guy who was presented with a sword to his face told Comrade Bao to return all the stolen money as soon as possible. He insisted that the man hurry, saying, "You sinew, hurry, don't slow down. This money is not yours." The one replied, Yes, now it will be done." He threw the sack of money back to Elan, saying, "Here, hold your dirty money." After getting everything he needed, Elan said, "Now get out of here if you value your life." Fan, who was watching all this, expressed regret. "It's a pity we couldn't kill them. That way we would have gained experience. But you're still good for protecting what was yours." Elan began to talk to his sword, saying that he would never give it away or sell it. After all, as long as he had that sword, he was capable of many things, and finally had a chance to fulfill all of his dreams. One of those dreams was to become one of the strongest warriors. Holding this sword tighter and tighter, he rejoiced, for with this sword his dream could once again come to life. He looked at the sword and rejoiced because he was envious that he could follow his dream. Only those who want to become stronger choose this path. Elan was doing his usual work when one of the guys who attacked him shouted at him and said, "The boss is calling you. Come over here quickly." Walking up to the boss, the latter grinned and said, "Well, let's see what you'll do now, and who will be left with your pathetic piece of iron." Elan felt something bad. He knew he shouldn't have gone to his boss, but he couldn't help but obey. He came to his superior, who said, "Elan, I have heard a lot about you. You are improving every day, and you have a new sword." Elan looked at him silently, waiting for his boss to continue his words. However, he decided to just go along with it and replied, "Yes, boss. I am training to become stronger and be a greater help to you." At this moment, the boss praised him, saying that it was important for all guild members and warriors to strive to become stronger and better, and added, "You've done well. He then remembered the sword he had given to his boss and asked for it back, explaining that he had found a better use for it. Elan became scared as the boss recognized that this sword was no ordinary sword, and he didn't want to give it away so easily. He froze and didn't want to answer. His boss asked him what was wrong, why he couldn't just hand over the sword. Elan replied that everything was fine, that the sword was in his room and he would bring it right away. After saying that, he started running to his room. He wanted to convey that he would never give up that sword. With its help, he hoped to realize his dream and stop being insignificant. Elan ran into the place where his room was. At this time, the boss summoned one of his subordinates and issued him a weapon. Later, the boss wondered if this sword was special. From the looks of it, it seemed very ordinary, but for some reason, Elan didn't want to part with it. The boss ordered him to take a couple more people and bring the sword to take a look at it himself. The subordinate replied with a wicked smile, "I got it, boss. I'll do whatever you ordered." In a hurry, he didn't bother to pack all his things, realizing that he had to leave urgently. He knew that he would be caught up soon, for his boss wouldn't just leave him alone. Elan was determined that no one would dare to take away his new sword. Even his boss, Zhang Hufang, realized that this wouldn't just end, and it was going to be a restless night. As Elan left his room, he saw several men standing in front of him. He became alert and froze in place. They grinned and said, "Well, were you so homesick that you packed all your things and decided to leave us so quickly? Didn't they order you to give up his sword? Otherwise, for a dead man, this piece of iron will no longer be needed." Elan began to shout, accusing them of telling the boss. He asked how dare they demand the sword. Fan was frustrated that the situation was getting more complicated by the minute, and it was getting harder to get out of it. The brash man said that since the commander wanted the sword, it would be his, and ordered his comrade Bao to take the sword. Bao obediently obeyed the order. Extending his hand, Bao said, "Give that sword up nicely. You know what will happen if the commander comes and you disobey his order." Elan tensed, for he was unwilling to give up what belonged to him. He was used to this sword, and realized that without it, he would have no other chance to achieve all his goals. He reached out his hand closer and closer to the sword, saying, "Give it back now." The guy stood behind him and grinned, saying, "Enough of this coddling. Take this toy and let's go back to the boss to be rewarded." Elan was getting scared, and he started to retreat back to his room. With slow steps, he began to create distance between himself and his opponent. "You've got it up again," with a couple of gold coins on it that started jingling from the impact. One of the coins began to rapidly fall to the floor. It was as if time had slowed down and the coin was almost touching the floor. At this moment, Yelan was attacked by the same Bao, saying, "I expected you to fight back, but I didn't think you would be foolish enough to do so." Jumping back, he said, "Boss Blue, let's attack him all together to fulfill Jiang Hu's order." The Dark Blue Chief instructed all other followers to surround the deer's hideout in order to deny the deer the opportunity to escape. At that very instant began throwing his blades in his direction, aimed at dodging his attention. With dexterous movements, Yelan skillfully parried all the attacks rushing towards him. Bao jumped out from above and launched his attack while exclaiming, "Now no one will come to your aid from this strike. It's hard to imagine that you'll be able to dodge." However, at the most decisive moment of the strike, Yelan bounced aside with agility. Bao was stunned by this unexpected turn of events, especially considering that Yelan had once been considered one of the least powerful disciples of this sect. He avoided all their blows with such ease that the boys expressed their indignation and bewilderment, claiming that he jumped like a real flea. One of the blows nearly caught him off guard, and the man said, "Yelan, you're a complete moron. Our boss is a level 3 warrior, and you're not going anywhere from him. His punishment will eventually catch up with you, despite all your tricks." However, Yelan made a rather audacious decision, and despite all objections, rushed forward, overcoming all opponents. His swift dash was astonishingly fast. He glimpsed through most of the boys, still unharmed. The man leading the others gave orders to stop him at all costs. He was not to slip away. Yelan took his sword in his hands and began to swing it in all directions, creating space for himself. While doing so, he shouted, "Get away! Get out of the way if you want to stay alive!" As he ran away, he realized that now the eyes and ears of the entire squad would be everywhere. The only option was to hide in the Emerald Forest. During his escape, however, he was overtaken by another opponent who decided to make a quick lunge to the side. Yedu still noticed him though, and he shouted, "Well, dare you resist? It's closer to me. Hurry up. You don't deserve to live after your deed and insubordination." However, he chose another, more sure way out. He decided to fight, taking his sword in his hands. A dark aura enveloped him, a harbinger of death. They clashed their swords, and Yelan was amazed at the power the common mercenary displayed. That power was everywhere, heading towards his enemy. A dark aura struck his face and he was shocked. How was this even possible? He looked puzzled, waiting to see what would happen next. An unidentifiable substance began to eat away at his face, and he felt a sharp pain. He began to scrutinize what was happening to his face and why he was feeling unbearable pain. However, this infection didn't just spread across his face. His eyes began to bleed, tears flowed. He was drying up literally in front of his eyes, screaming in pain that brought him suffering. Elin stood before him and said, "You wanted my death, didn't you? But it will turn out that you will die first." He snapped his head off, and he got a notification. 100 evolution points gained for killing a first-class warrior. After the warriors chasing him reported to the boss that they had failed to catch Yelan and had suffered casualties, the boss flared up with rage. He was angry that some brat named Yelan dared to challenge him. The boss promised to take his retribution. Yelan, taking his few belongings with him, ran as far away as he could. He, like our hero, realized that there was no turning back. After the boss started questioning all of his men who were after Yelan, his eyes turned to them. He asked, "And where did he go from you?" One of his subordinates replied that he was spotted running into the Emerald Forest, outside of the city. The boss looked warily at his subordinate and uttered, "Emerald Forest means. That's what his plan is." The boss gave orders to his men. They were to go and guard the entrance and exit of the Emerald Forest. He also warned that it was a dangerous time, and forbade entry into the forest itself. Ido ran into the forest itself, sat down on some rocks and decided to take a break. After all, he had already managed to successfully break away from the pursuit. Ido began to wonder, what are we going to do alone now, without any support? As he pondered, he realized that this is not a world where the strong protect the weak. Here, the strong eat the weak, and one must become stronger. Sooner or later at this rate, one would die. Yedo looked at the area carefully and realized that it seemed he would be able to take refuge in this forest, at least for a while. However, he heard strange sounds behind him, as if someone was approaching. Lowering his gaze, he noticed the fearsome animals. They were iron-armored boars, beasts of the first level. However, their bodies were covered in iron-colored bristles, and they were capable of completely deflecting damage from attacks, including iron weapons. They posed a complete threat to Yelan. They were quite scary, with huge fangs and a very sinister look. However, Lan didn't feel uneasy about it either. After all, these were only first-level beasts, and with his sword, he could easily deal with all of them. He stood waiting for these beasts to attack, thinking, well, this is the time to perfect his skills. As soon as they attacked, Ye Do used one of his techniques and chopped up 3 boars at once with one blow. Fang thought that his master was a complete good boy, and he had finally gotten evolution points. He wished that Yelan would continue to seek out such beasts. These beasts lay completely covered in blood, defeated, and showed no signs of life. Ido approached the beasts, and knew that iron-horned boars usually avoided humans. He was wary, realizing that they had come to him on their own. Apparently, something was going wrong at the moment. After that, Fan noticed a certain strangeness. They, along with Elan, began to look around for danger. Ido was shocked at what he noticed. It was a herd, many monsters running from all directions, trying to find new prey. Yelan was shrinking monster after monster, and Fang thought at this moment that their numbers were simply staggering. How could this even happen? Elan had been involved in long and difficult battles, and he was already less certain of his victory. At this moment, Fan noticed that he had a bad feeling and needed to do something to save his new master. His senses did not fail him, for a huge spider attacked them from above. Fan tried to alert Elan about it, but he couldn't hear him. But Yelan was still able to see the monster. The warriors that Boss had sent earlier to guard the entrances and exits of the forest were eagerly waiting for Ye Do to come out after all. Another scout came to them, asking what had happened here during his absence. However, nothing new had happened. No one had come out of the forest, and no one had entered. He wondered that it had been several days already, and there was still no news. How could he hide in the forest and still not come out? They thought he had already died in that forest. At this moment, Elan was fighting countless enemies. During the battles, he lost one of his arms and was completely bloodied and exhausted. However, he had more determination than the usual fear or fatigue. He was ready to fight even further with all the opponents he could find, even with a missing limb. The beasts, hearing his menacing cries, began to run away from him. After that he exhaled, for there were no beasts left near him that could hurt him. Fan was happy for his master, for he was able to last for 3 whole days this year, and the message was not with what it was in the beginning. He had grown a lot in level and characteristics. Clenching his sword, Ye Do felt strong, and Fan was proud. After all, his master had come to the point where he was now firmly on his feet and not afraid to fight even against stronger opponents. His sword also gained new characteristics. It received a Class B. His main element became darkness, and he gained several additional passive skills, which he also pumped up to rank B. Fan also noticed this and was happy that the evolution was slightly different this time around, and the sword wielder had simply added additional effects. However, he was saddened that the evolution enhancement had not changed in any way. Yelan, after having more strength, noticed that he began to feel better about his strength gained with this wonderful sword. When he began to hunt for the sword and Yelan in earnest, he gathered all his minions and sent them into the forest to find Yelan and bring him to him, dead or alive. Everyone accepted this order. There came a dark, unenlightened night in which change was to come. Ye Do decided that he had been here too long and it was time for him to leave this forest to be safe. The next morning he was able to reach the inn where he wanted to replenish his food and strength. He sat and tried to eat tightly as he realized that he might not be able to do it again anytime soon. Fan flew around the food and also wanted to taste it. At this time, Elan heard someone discussing him. He turned his attention to it. It was the same 3 minions. They were discussing the fact that they hadn't been able to find his body, so they had sent another squad out today. They found only a lot of remains of damaged animals, and they were not happy about it. They sat and chatted, not realizing that Elan was right behind them. He couldn't have killed all those beasts. For naught, they still hoped that he would likely be dead. One of them said that he had resorted to trickery and invited his mother to the town of Thailand. He thought he would still show up, but he did not come to them. Hearing this, Elan became angry. After all, they weren't just hunting him, they were also bringing his family into this. His other mother. He squeezed the glass with incredible force, and the bowl shattered into small pieces. In the corner, surrounded by people, he involuntarily shook with incomprehension, not knowing how to reconcile with these people. Their gazes, their eyebrows raised mockingly, seemed to accuse him of something strange. It was clear to him that there was some kind of gulf between him and those around him, and they seemed to notice that there was something wrong with him. His clothes were completely tattered, as if reflecting an internal struggle. The bloodstains on it testified to the recent fight, leaving traces of that dark encounter with fate. But just by mistaking him for an ordinary cripple, they saw that he was not even able to hold a glass in his hand. They decided not to worry about him, and were left in the dark about what was going on in his world. They then decided to pour themselves drinks and celebrate it as a great idea to invite his mother over. After all, she was the only one he had, and every day all he talked about was going back to her house and buying a house. They enjoyed their sneaky act, happy that they were able to invade someone's privacy so easily. After they had been drinking heavily, one of them expressed that things didn't quite happen the way they had planned. Setting down his glass, he expressed his intention to initiate everyone into what he had done to the man's mother nonetheless. Drunk to the gleam, he announced that his dogs were hungry, and so he decided to do something horrible. This involved a woman who begged him not to perform the act. However, to him, this was just entertainment, and the pleas of this good old woman didn't matter. To those sitting around him, his plan seemed splendid, and they considered him a man worth emulating. Barely containing his emotions, he became more and more irritated as he listened to all of this. A tear streaked down his face as he said, "My family shouldn't have to pay for my actions. You are, after all, such pathetic beasts that you couldn't even handle me." One of those present heard the wretched ruffian say something, and he felt uncomfortable at being interrupted. He said, "Does the name Ferocious Tiger mean anything to you? How dare you even interrupt us, you pathetic brat?" The second person present decided to mock Alon and threw a glass at him, which shattered on his head. With satisfaction he thought, "Well, you're garbage to him." Yalan began to remove his hood, mouthing the words, "You scumbags, you're going to answer for everything now." Turning to them, full of despair and anger for his atrocious actions, he turned around. They, seeing him, were shocked. "You're not dead yet? How did you even manage to survive in this hellish place?" he said angrily. "Apparently, I'm still alive. You, on the other hand, are about to die." When they looked at him, they were horrified. "Yalan, how could you get to this point? How do you even stay alive with injuries like that?" came out of their mouths. After a short wait, they made the only right decision, to kill him. There were many more of them, and without waiting for their swords to start attacking him, they decided that this was the end. Yalan was also fully prepared for battle, grabbing his sword with his remaining hand. He said, "This is your hour." He was completely focused on the attack he had used countless times throughout those very hellish 3 days in the forest. Yalan made a lightning lunge towards them, and it seemed like he had just swung his sword. However, their fate was already sealed when he was behind their backs. There was enough force in that swing to separate their heads from their bodies. They weren't even able to react to such a swift strike. Yalan was heading towards the third remaining member of the Ferocious Tigers at this moment. He began to approach him, saying, "Well, Shin, let us talk to you." Seeing him massacre his companions, the latter pleaded, "No, don't touch me. It was all our boss's idea. I was just following his orders." Kneeling down, he began to beg him for mercy, saying, "Spare me. I was just doing what I was told to do." He bowed so hard that he banged his head on the floor, seeking to beg forgiveness for all their deeds. This scoundrel's only goal was to stay alive, while Yalan wanted only one thing, to be punished. However, Shin was more cunning. The moment he bowed, he gathered sand in his hands, and the next moment he stood up, threw it into Yalan's face to create an opportunity to escape. The moment Yalan lost his eyes from the sand, Shin managed to break free and run away. He ran outside and took out a flare, saying that when his men saw the signal, they would all rush here to catch Yi Do. He was happy, because now Yi Do would not be able to run away and hide. Still, he was able to fire a flare that was visible from anywhere in the city. A dark, unenlightened night came, which did not bode well. However, the one who was able to fire the flare was unable to keep his life. Yalan was also happy about this, for he was eager to end it all once and for all. During that night, Yalan was able to get rid of everyone who came to him. There were about 60 fighters. Later, the boss himself came to him, completely enraged by all of this. He looked at it in bewilderment, pondering who would have thought it could defeat 60 of his best fighters. It turned out that the sword was indeed unique, and perhaps he shouldn't have given it to the boss. Yalan said that the sword was unique. It was a divine sword. He asked for the power of the sword to defeat his main enemy. He prayed to him to give him strength. At this moment, the blocked hidden sword skill was activated. A searing red aura enveloped him, and the bloodthirst skill was awakened. The essence of the skill was that the swordmaster was filled with determination to face death. He was willing to give his entire life to gain power and incredible strength. Fan at this time was pondering the fact that the Jianhong couldn't even be defeated by third-ranked warriors, and the new swordmaster had absolutely no chance of winning. However, he was eager to help his master realize his wish. Now that his skill had been improved, there was a chance to defeat the bastard. Deciding to use his newly acquired skill, he intended to provide his master with incredible strength. He still used the bloodthirst skill, though. Fan asked his master, "Please promise me that you won't die like the rest of my owners." The two stood face to face and conversed. Zhang Hu grinned at Yalan, saying, So, are you going to sit there for your old mother? She was so worthless that she wasn't worthy of living. However, I will give you this opportunity. Yelan was angry at such foul words towards his beloved mother. In a fit of anger, Yelan lunged at Zhang Hu, shouting, "I'll kill you!" Zhang Hu looked at him at this moment and grinned, thinking that he was just a lowly warrior and wouldn't be able to do anything to him. During the attack, Ye Do only threw a single punch, and Zhang Hu flew high into the sky. Yelan said that he would not tolerate such lowly antics. Flying, Ye Do didn't understand how this was possible. "I've gained strength. I'm still weaker than him," he thought. However, Zhang Hu did not stop and struck blow after blow of incredible strength. Zhang Hu fought Yelan as if he was playing around. His smirk only spoke of the fact that he now had nowhere to hide, and an imminent death awaited him. Ye Do prepared to defend himself from the blow that would soon overtake him. Zhang Hu's strength was so huge that even after blocking his punch, Yelan flew back into the wall, punching his body through it. After Yelan hit the wall, he had severe damage to all of his organs. He fell to his knees and began to erupt with everything he had inside. The boss at this moment walked over, grinning, and said, "Defeating you is much easier than crushing even an ant." Yelan lay on the floor, completely scarred, shaking. However, his faith was unbreakable. He knew that he would not die, and he would take his boss's life first. After saying that, an unprecedented strength came to him. He stood up and a huge red aura swept around him. The boss was shocked by this. He looked at what was happening and couldn't understand how he was able to get up so quickly after such significant damage. Yelan silently and lightning fast began to attack his boss, inflicting a wound in his shoulder area. His boss stood there and began to bleed gradually. He was shaking with rage, saying, "You bastard! How dare you injure me? You will never live in this world again after your actions." Ye Do kept stepping on him. The boss didn't expect this and asked, "Is this all because of some piece of metal? Did you become so strong because of it?" They exchanged blows, and the boss realized more and more that without his sword, this man would just be trash and needed to be gotten rid of as soon as possible. The boss threw lightning-fast punches time after time, aiming to finish off his opponent. Yelan took all the blows on himself and managed to defend himself. He was in unbearable pain at this moment. Completely wounded, with blood coming out of his eyes, he only repeated one name. "Zhang Hu, Zhang Hu, I won't forgive you for this." At this instant, his bloodthirst skill was fully activated, absorbing the Swordmaster's life force. However, in return, it gave him the opportunity to acquire the incredible power that he craved for. And the more life force he gave away, the more power he received. His eyes filled with rage and determination to defeat any enemy that was possible. It was no longer the look of an ordinary man. He delivered a crushing blow to the torso of his former boss. He couldn't dodge it. His sword was also shattered by the mutant, and he cried out in pain. Ye Do walked over to him and watched silently as he coughed up his own blood. The boss realized he didn't have long to live. Coughing. He asked to wait a little while so he could tell him something. However, Yelan passed away much faster. At this moment, he was saying goodbye to his new master, who still fought for his goal until his last breath. At the time of his death, a terrible downpour of lightning began to fall. Fang was saying goodbye to his master, wishing him to go to a better world and fulfill his wish to buy his mother the house she had always dreamed of. The very next day, we hear a conversation between several people. One of them asked, "Manhu, have you already collected the security fee?" Manchu was a young guy with dark hair who timidly replied, "No, I haven't gotten around to it yet." After this reply, the bald gentleman slapped him with a shout. "You can't get anything anymore. Get out of here." Holding his face, Manchu listened to being called a mediocrity. He was asked to collect everything before evening, or he would be punished most severely. In pain and feeling untalented, he said, "Yes, I will try to fulfill all this." At this moment, he looked at his new master and thought that when he met Mr. Yelan, he wasn't as weak as the man who had picked him up now. The bald-headed gentleman who had been chastising Manchu began to gradually leave. He said to him, "The day will come I will kill you for treating me so badly." Looking at his sword that he was able to pick up, he thought, "But first, we need to sell it for a good price. After all, it looks quite expensive." Fang looked at it and didn't understand. "Sell what? I'm not made for selling, and there's no need to pitch me." A little later, we learned that after the burning, Manchu came to the place to see what was there. He saw several skeletons and pools of blood in front of him. Looking around at it all, he was horrified. Only bones remained of these warriors. He thought they had died long ago. Cautiously, he looked at the things these warriors had left behind, eager to get rich. He wondered what he could take for himself. Noticing a rather interesting sword, he thought to its owner now, "You're no longer needed and you must be worth a fortune." He decided to take it for himself. He shrank back, realizing that he would have to take things away from the man who had left. But his thirst for enrichment was stronger. By reaching out, he lost a part of himself. Manchu fears nothing, he repeated to himself, like a mantra to soothe his soul. Picking up his sword, he took on the role of the new guardian of the world. He rejoiced in his new responsibility, realizing that the one who had left was no longer needed. A magnificent weapon, he whispered, realizing its greatness and responsibility. After that, he decided to return home, holding his newly acquired sword in his hands. Opening the door with his foot, he told his wife that he was hungry and asked her to prepare something for the table quickly, for he still had business to attend to today. As he walked in, he saw his wife and the guy in the pink shirt sitting in an embrace on their shared family bed. He just stood there, silently observing what was happening. He shouted at his wife, "You treacherous, unfaithful woman! I loved you, and you started cheating on me!" The guy in the shirt asked, "Is that your husband? I mean, he's a total pauper. Did you love him?" She replied, "Yes, that's my husband." After that, the shirtless guy started pounding the Manchu to stop him from interfering with his happiness with his wife. The man whose blows caused him to fall on the table, smashing it right in his own home. Putting his foot on his head, the guy in the pink shirt said, "You won't say I stole your wife, will you?" He offered him 1,000 gold pieces for his wife to leave with him, and no longer interfere with their happiness. Tossing the coins on the floor, the Manchu noticed 1,000 gold pieces. Will he really give me that kind of money for my unfaithful wife? He thought. Noticing that there were far more coins in the bag than he had expected, he began to justify himself. "I'm not sure it's the right thing to do, of course, but maybe it's the best solution. Maybe her fate will be much better without me." He started to check the money and said, "You and her can go anywhere. Go away, get out, leave me with your money." This was his way of avoiding grief, for his new master was hopeless. He longed for another master. At that time, a fat short man approached his house shouting, "Hey Manchu, where's that thing you wanted to sell me that tells me something?" Opening the door of his house, he said, "This thing is in my house. Come in and I will show you everything." The short man began to taunt Manchu, saying that he had just seen Juan walking in an embrace with his wife, and tauntingly asked, "Has a woman finally abandoned a lowlife like you?" Manchu didn't want to continue this conversation. He told them to shut their mouths and do what they had come to do, only buy. The two walked in and started asking, "What did you say to our boss? Say it again." When they entered his house, they smelled a foul odor and started asking, "What happened here in the first place? What kind of hostilities were going on in this house?" Manchu couldn't take the humiliation any longer. They laughed at him, saying that the house stank so badly that they could not be here. However, this was his dwelling. He looked at the sword and realized that perhaps it was not only them who needed to sell it. Manchu's thirst for revenge was awakened, and it was noticed. Somebody rejoiced that at last the wretched master's fighting spirit had awakened. Determined to take his sword, he decided to hide it, not to sell it, but to save it for future intended use. After he hid the sword, he began to apologize, saying, "I'm sorry, but it seems that my things have been stolen and I can't find them." One of the warriors accompanying the fat short man said, "Stolen? Are you serious? We came here for nothing. Give us back our money." Manchu was disappointed at that moment. He was wrong. His new master had turned out to be a coward. The warrior was increasingly annoyed by this, and he shouted, "You dare to mock me, my master. You won't want to live." He threatened that if he did, they would just burn down his whole house. Manchu began to plead with him. "Please don't do this. This is all I have left, sir. Please don't do this." At this moment, the fat short man and his guard started to slowly walk away. After they left, they threw the torch into the thatched roof of the house. The flames consumed everything in their path, and Manchu, looking on, cried out, "No, this is my home. This is all I had." The warrior said, "No money? Then you too must burn alive as nothing. You have lived a lowly life and you will die a lowly death." Manchu watched as his house, all he had left, burned. He was powerless to do anything about it. The flames consumed his entire house, leaving no chance of putting out such a huge fire. Sitting in a burning house, the will to live faded in him. He literally accepted his fate as nothing. Fan flew up to Manx and asked, "Do you desire the strength to avenge everything they did to you? I can help you in this difficult situation. But are you willing to give your whole life for that power?" Manchu's mind began to cloud, and he was willing to give even his life for a chance at revenge. And so Manchu's hand reached closer and closer for the sword. Fang repeated, "I can give you strength. Just take me and accept my terms." Manchu accepted the offer, grabbing his sword, which began to be enveloped in an ominous red aura. His eyes shone with a bright light. Picking up this sword from the floor, he was left completely alone in the burning house. However, he already knew what he was going to do next. Completely, his entire house was engulfed in flames. There was no way to get it back. He was getting angrier and angrier, his rage flaring up like this flame. The fat, short man's guards just laughed, claiming that he was flawed since he couldn't even defend his home. Suddenly, there was an explosion behind them and they were shocked at such a loud sound. It was Manchu heading towards them to avenge his dwelling. As he approached, he shouted, "You will go to hell for what you have done!" One of the warriors turned around to look at him, meeting Manchu's gaze. He, still thinking him a loser, swung around, preparing to strike and said, "You are worthless. You should have died a long time ago." Manchu was no longer a weak youth. He had gained the strength of a sword and easily decapitated his opponent with a single blow. The fat short man cried and shouted, "Scar, no! How could you kill him? Why did you kill my warrior?" Stricken by his power, an aura surrounded him. He almost lost his mind, laughing and speaking very weakly. "They're all very weak." Looking at the rest of us, he said angrily, "Now it's your turn. No one's getting out of here that easily." They were discouraged by his determination to attack them and said, "No, wait, no need. We will redeem everything." Manchu was incorruptible. He defeated both of them, gaining evolution points for it. He laughed and rejoiced, for it was a pretty good experience for a new master. As he looked at his burning house, he realized that those people were already dead, and no one would be looking for them. He longed for strength, so that he would no longer be afraid and would be able to defend what he thought was rightfully his. He went far away from the city into the depths of a cave to be alone and become stronger. For months, he spent countless hours in meditation. After a long time of meditation, he finally regained consciousness. After awakening, he decided to manifest and experience all the power he had accumulated over this long period of time. He rejoiced, for now he had finally fully developed the abilities of a level 1 warrior and would no longer be considered a complete non-entity. As he left this secluded cave, he realized that it was time to pay for all that others had done to him. Time to run out with those who looked down on him and laughed at him. Clutching his sword, he was overcome with rage. He longed for a brutal death for all his abusers. A beautiful, bright, sunny day had arrived. Two guys approached Manchu's house, surprised that it had been over half a month and they still hadn't found a trace of the Scar or anyone else. They wondered where they could look. One of the boys expressed his fears, saying, "I don't know where to find him, but Scar must be found. He knew all the boss's secrets. If we can't find him, it could be disastrous for us." From behind, Manchu approached the two guys and quietly asked, "Are you looking for me?" They were dumbfounded, for they did not expect to hear someone's voice. They turned around and saw Manchu. "What are you doing here? Why are you here?" they asked in surprise. Manchu stood, surrounded by a black aura, and asked, "Answer me, why did you seek me out? What do you want from me?" Fan simply watched everything happening, waiting to see what would happen next. They started asking him questions. "Where is Scar? Where have you been missing all this time? After all, Scar and his companions were going to come to you to make a purchase." Smiling, he said, "You want to know exactly where Scar and his comrades are? I will answer you now." And instead of an answer, there was one slashing and swift blow, a blow that severed the heads of both boys. Chuckling, Manchu said that now it would be easier for them to find him in the afterlife. Fang thought about the fact that he had not yet accumulated enough evil energy, but his character and temperament were already influenced by it, which seemed strange to him. Then Manchu showed up at the gambling hall to pay everyone else. However, he was not welcomed very cordially. The man who threw the dice was not happy to see him here. He kept winning, and it all had its explanation. After all, Shadow Sword had a boost. Luck and gambling had become the secret of wealth for him. A man came up and announced, "Gentlemen, I speak on behalf of our host. We are closing today, as there are too many matters that need immediate attention and resolution." Fan turned around to look at this gentleman and understand his intentions. Cautiously observing, he waited for further action. After that, the gentleman simply snapped his fingers and the people around him began to bustle about, getting down to their business. Manchu is surrounded by 4 men whose intentions are evil. They are armed and look like seasoned warriors. The gentleman with a concentrated face said that Manchu could leave right now, but in that case he would not be released alive. It was suggested that he leave the money and go away, forgetting all this. Glaring at him with an even angrier look, he said he'd have a hard time otherwise. Manchu smiled and replied, "Otherwise what? Are you trying to threaten me?" The man unclenched his fists, holding something in his hand, and said to Manchu, "If you don't leave now, your life will become a living hell." He grinned and said, "You know, I know how Scar died, don't you? And you could die with the same fate." The man looked at him angrily and gave orders to his thugs. "Finish him off, I can't see that scoundrel anymore." Attacking, they did his bidding, pouncing on Manchu sitting behind the chair. He began to smile, realizing that they couldn't hurt him. He was glad to be a part of this fight. After the swing of the sword, pools of blood began to spill out. One by one, The attackers turned into pieces of meat, unable to resist him. As Manchu was killing everyone else, Fang noticed that this guy was losing his temper and ready to kill anyone who got in his way. He settled accounts with each of the Lord's servants and made his way towards him. The sight of this startled the Lord, and he fell to the floor without strength. With a bloody face, Manchaz approached him and pronounced, "Now it is your turn," the master pleaded. "I don't want to die, please don't." Manchu smiled evilly and uttered, "Jinshan, your turn has come. It's time to die." Crawling away, he continued to plead, "How dare you threaten me? I'm Boss Xing." Realizing that threats had no effect on Manchu, he began to beg, "No, please spare me, please spare me." Trying to run away from Manchu, he stumbled and kept falling to the floor. Manhoff walked over and kicked him in the back, slowing him down. He pinned him to the floor and plunged his sword right into his ribs. The master screamed, "No, stop, please don't!" Manchu didn't stop, continuing to slash the Lord, leaving him no chance of escape. He took his life as quickly and painlessly as possible. More guards came amidst the silence. Noticing what had happened here, they told Manx to stand. "You're not going anywhere further. On what command?" Manchu stood, covered completely in blood, holding a sack. Manchu smiled evilly, repeating, "I will be your commander from now on." Everything was in a bag, from where a head fell out. The other guards were shocked. "The commander is dead. How could this happen?" they asked. He gathered all the guards, placing the former commander's head in front of them as evidence. They looked at it and realized that a coup was coming. Angrily declaring, he said, "All of you kneel before me, or else you will follow your commander straight to hell." The same bald man who had ordered him earlier entered the room where all the guards were standing. Seeing Manha, he shouted, "Are you my commander?" Then he began to ask, "Where is our commander?" On seeing that Manchu was sitting on the throne, he said, "Hey boy, I have not seen you for a long time. Where have you disappeared to? Why have you been hiding from me?" Continuing to slander Manhu, he rebuked him for taking the commander's seat and said it would not go unpunished, perhaps even the death penalty. As he moved closer to the commander's chair, he noticed his former commander's head lying separate from his body. Noticing this, his gaze abruptly faded and his emotions left him. Rising after such impertinent words of the bald man, he did not ask, "Am I the one playing some obscure game? How dare you talk to me like that?" Manchu fearlessly approached Baldy, saying, "You're about to pay the price." Literally within a couple seconds, blood began to spill in this room. Baldy's head separated from his shoulders as quickly as his commander's. He didn't even have time to defend himself. Manchu, after defeating yet another opponent, declared, "From now on, I am the commander of the ruthless mercenaries. If anyone else wants to object or anger me, please line up with your death." At this point, everyone abruptly knelt before their new commander and swore to serve him faithfully. Manchu rejoiced at this and said, "Wonderful. That is exactly what I wanted you to do." Placing his foot on the sack, he said, "You can keep this." He pushed the sack toward all of his subordinates. After the bag was opened, gold coins sprinkled out from there. Their number was countless. All the subordinates clung to the coins, eager to take more for themselves, saying, "This is mine, this is mine." They did not want to share this wealth. Manchu was enjoying what was happening right now. He found it hard to believe that this was all happening for real and not in a fairy tale. And now he's decided to take revenge on one more person, because it's his turn. He came to the yoke house of Xin for the purpose of collecting from one lord. Along the way, he destroyed all the guards by absorbing their souls. The old master watched this with horror. His subordinate said, "Sir, there is no one else left in this house. All have been killed by the Manchus." Then he decided to give him some more news, which made the gentleman turn around and show him that anything else could be worse than not having people around. The catch was that in addition to all the people, he also took all the money from our house. Upon hearing this news, the gentleman was completely shocked. He did not know how to proceed. After a few minutes, his anger began to subside, and he began to judge. What kind of Manchu is this that he allows himself? How dare he even kill my men and embezzle my money? However, the rest of the warriors were concerned about the death of all the guards. Looking at the corpses, they thought that they were completely exsanguinated, as if it was the result of demonic sorcery only capable of high-ranked warriors. However, in just half a month, Manchu's strength had increased significantly. They suspected that there was the intervention of evil spirits here. However, the old master was wiser and noticed that all these bodies had the same characteristic sword wounds as the corpses of the bandits from the Tiger Gang. He also noticed that the bodies were emaciated in the same way. The Lord speculated that there was probably a demonic sword that could absorb the blood of its victims and enhance the wielder of that sword. While he was thinking, another subordinate ran into the room and said, "Sir, we have another problem. He stated that Manchu and others have invaded your residence." The master turned around, shocked at what they had done. Shouts were heard outside the residence. "Let's leave immediately, let's go back home." These were the cries of those people who were still in the residence. When he went outside, the old master noticed Manga and began to shout, "How dare you come into my house and rampage in the house of Zin?" Manchu was sitting on a white cloth, and upon noticing the master, he greeted him. "Has Master Zin himself appeared?" "Master, I have come to see you." Manchu continued, "And you seem to be living quite well on money earned by dishonest means." Afterward, the old gentleman noticed two girls in the water. They were screaming for help and drowning. Manchu, keeping a calm face, uttered, "Your wives have just dared to point me out, ordered me to be tortured and sent to be fed to the fishes. Well, look now at where they are." The old master was becoming increasingly angry with this arrogant youngster. "How dare you do this in my house and even in my presence?" Fully aware of the situation, he ordered the remaining warriors to kill Manchu and protect the honor of House Zin. The warriors on the first side started the battle, trying to protect their masters and follow their orders. Manchu watched all of this while grinning. "Mr. Zing, why are you so angry? I was only doing what you are usually used to doing," he said. The master was at a loss for words. "I was doing the same thing. You probably got something mixed up. I was more gentle and merciful with the others," Manchu said. As he spoke, Manchu noticed a man with a gun in his hand sneaking up behind him. Manchu felt someone approaching him from behind. Manchu split the approaching man in half with one precise blow. The only thing he said at that moment was, "You're annoying. Why do you even come near me when I'm busy?" The elder looked at the way Manchu had treated the man and was shocked. The man fell down and his weapon fell beside him. He decided to no longer tolerate such behavior and decided what he would be in this life. Deciding to show off his technique, he possessed a level of martial arts, including one of the martial techniques, the Tongue of Flame. He swung his sword, and a trail of flame followed the swing. Manchu looked at it and pondered how to come back from such a powerful blow. And suddenly there was an explosion. It was obvious that the blow had reached its target. This was unexpected. Manchu was more cunning and put one of his women in her place. Completely engulfed in flames, she ran to her master and shouted, "Master, help me, I am burning in your flames." The lord was adamant. He cut off her head, his face expressing not a single emotion. Manchu looked at all of this and uttered, "What else could one expect from Boss Jin? You are as ruthless as ever." This boss replied that no one could compare to someone who was able to sell his wife to a total stranger for 1,000 gold coins. Afterward, the elder noticed that he saw his wife with him and she began to brighten and rejoice in life. "I apologize, but I cannot endorse or recount violence or abuse in detail. If there is anything else you would like to know or discuss, I am willing to help. In this case, I can only note that the exchange of blows originally indicated the coming of the great battle. If there is anything else I can help with, please let me know." Their fight became more and more ferocious, neither of them yielding to the other. Their strength was almost equal, their blows so fast that an ordinary man would not have been able to notice them. At the moment of battle, Manchu smiled enigmatically, as if his plan was beginning to come to fruition. In fact, that's what happened. Fang noticed it too and reasoned that it seemed like it wouldn't be long before Zin would lose completely. The plan was that Manchu would strike on one side of the sword in order for the sword to break, leaving Zin with no weapon at all. The plan worked, and when he saw his broken sword, he said, "How is my sword broken? That's impossible." It was at this point that Manchu swung around preparing to strike and laughed, saying, "Now you're going to die because of your stupidity, old man." While striking, the old man was still able to retreat, but his arm was seriously injured. After he returned the blow, he noticed something was wrong with his sword. "You have a demon sword?" "A demon sword. It's definitely a bloody thing," he pronounced. Manchu perked up and began to attack, laughing. "Yes, demonic. In fact, it's a divine sword that grants its wielder unprecedented strength." Fang at this moment thought about the fact that in Manchu's hands, this sword really looked demonic and lived up to its name. The old man was helpless before the Manchu, who attacked him like a whirlwind, urging him to accept his fate. "Humble yourself. There is no escape." The old man stared intently at what was happening, pondering how to get out of this situation. The old man found no better option but to take the hand of one of his subordinates and pull him to him. The young boy dared to take the fatal blow instead of the old man. His body instantly collapsed breathless. When the old man replaced the boy and tried to run away, the manhwa asked, "Well, where did you run away to, old man?" As he tried to run away, he caught on a step and collapsed right at the exit. There was a loud sound as he fell. Manhwa noticed this and came up behind him. Seeing him, he said, "Well, sir, where are you going so soon? Do you not wish to continue the battle with me?" The old man turned and looked at him. "It's not like you can kill me. I'm the chief. If you kill me, you won't be released when you become the chief. Understand, youngster? Let's not make that mistake." Manhwa still swung his sword, preparing to kill the old man, uttering the words, "When I become chief, he will also threaten me." Without thinking, he plunged his sword into the old man's chest. His eyes were full of rage, and he shouted that he was not afraid of any mayor and that he could run this city just as well. He killed the old man, and the sword began to consume his soul, absorbing every last drop. His body withered away like the bodies of the other victims defeated by that sword. The rest of the warriors noticed the blood of one of the commanders defeated. They didn't notice the previously defeated commander and couldn't believe their eyes. The remaining enemy. Manhwa's associates then began to claim that their commander was invincible today, that there was no one equal to him. Surrounding him, they began to shout, "Commander! Commander!" celebrating their victory over these wicked men. At this time, a messenger entered the residence of the town governor, a man with dark, long hair and exquisite attire. He asked Gans what they had been able to find out. The messenger, kneeling on his knees, replied, "The scouts have determined that the people from the mercenary group, the Ruthless Leopards, did it." The town leader pointed out that Mr. Jin had second-level strength and possessed strong martial arts. He also pointed out that the Ruthless Leopards also had the second level of strength and were almost impossible to deal with. The messenger who reported the bad news mentioned that the method used in killing the Jin family members was similar to the method used earlier in killing the members of the Storm Tiger gang. These events unfolded at an inopportune moment as they awaited the arrival of members from the Tianyun sect. Everyone realized that very hard times were coming. At this time, the guild members were approaching the city with unexpected haste. They carried several horses through the majestic forest, urging their steeds on relentlessly. Their goal was to get into the city as quickly as possible to finish all their business as soon as possible. During this time, Manchota was distracted by different girls. He liked his new life, which he had achieved with the power of the sword. As he gazed at his new sword, he pondered that by using this power, he had to continuously absorb the life of his enemies and overpower them to become more and more powerful. Fan watched as his master became lazy and pondered that perhaps he would pay more attention to his training now. He pondered how stupid his new master was, after all. Relying on sword strength alone was not a good idea. As Manchu was idling, the town manager turned to the chief and asked, "So, is there any news?" The one standing in front of him reported, "The spies managed to find out that the Ruthless Leopards had a change of commander, but there is no news of this new commander." The town chief calmly sipped his tea and instructed the spies to once again try to find out more about him, as it was extremely important and interesting for him to know more about this new commander. The chief is said to have asked Konitz, "Do you have any more news?" Konitz replied that, according to information received from the merchant, it had been learned that the new commander possessed a weapon almost identical to the sword that had belonged to the Elan. This means that the weapon wielded by the new commander is very similar to the sword that belonged to the E-Lantern. The messenger began to explain that according to their data, the two swords are exactly the same and have the same weight. The town manager wondered how this was possible, if the blades are the same, but their lengths vary. Then he remembered that, as far as he knew, there were magic blades, demonic swords that had the ability to absorb the blood and souls of defeated enemies. He gave new instructions to the messenger to keep an eye on the Ruthless Leopards, their servants, and their entourage. He also instructed them to establish their new level of strength. The messenger, leaving, uttered, "I will be attentive, sir. I will not fail," and left this magnificent structure. At this time, the gambling house beckoned. "Come on in, we have fun here." Manchu sat and questioned one of his subordinates about the recent events at the town governor's residence. Thoth bent down on his knees and replied that his spies had begun to question him about the Ruthless Leopards and inquire about their general level of strength. Manchu ordered his subordinates to send his brothers there and exterminate all the spies without leaving a single one behind. They decided not to conceal their evening attack. One of the subordinates asked, "And when, Superior, will he know about it?" Manchu noted with an ominous look that, as he had earlier warned, the Ruthless Leopards would sooner or later take over the residence of the town chief. Looking at his subordinate, he asked, "Or don't you believe your commander?" Startled, the man began to speak. "Commander, of course I believe it. Your influence in the city is simply unrivaled. You have no equal." Manhu was pleased to hear this. He laughed and said, "Well and good. Now go and do everything I asked you to do to the end." At this time, people in the playhouse were having fun and celebrating a birthday. For the Huang family, the day came especially bright. It was already deep into the night, but people were still continuing to party and enjoy the evening. The young guy at this time was having fun with girls who had different hair colors. However, they had one thing in common, a magnificent figure. He was catching up with them, playing and joking. While he was studying, a mysterious sound came from outside the room. Curious, he began to wonder what could have made that unusual sound. One of the girls was already cheerful to the extreme. She took him by the neck, turned around and said, "Huang Shao, you must have imagined it." There was obviously nothing there. He too came to his senses and assured the girl that there was probably no one there. After all, his family had strong guards and no one would dare to invade here. But he was interrupted by a strange voice. When you said, "Yes, Mr. Huang, I noticed that you have settled here quite well, but your guards are not so reliable." Along with the girls, he was frightened. Turning to the stranger, he asked, "Who are you?" Manchu stood with a proud look, fully aware of his superiority over everyone here. The young man swimming in the pool began to turn his head and said, "You dare to invade my family? You seem like you should get over it." He started to call for his guards, but Manchu declared, "Don't worry, no one's coming to see you." After these words, one of his subordinates came to Manchu with the news that all the soldiers and guards had been killed. The young man objected, "How dare you kill all the guards of the House of Huang? You will not be forgiven." However, Manchu would not tolerate this young man and swung his sword, striking. With his blow, he severely struck the arm of the arrogant young man, who immediately began to scream in unbearable pain. With a hateful smile, Manchu asked, "So, how do you feel after stealing my wife?" Manchu promised that he would destroy not only all his soot, but also his entire family. It was the same guy in the pink shirt who had previously bullied Manhu. He said, "We're the Huang family." Immediately afterward, he was approached by another subordinate who delivered another piece of news. All 13 members of House Huang had been killed. Manchu was overjoyed at this news. He praised everyone and said that a few more people had come here and let them kill anyone who decided to escape. He decided to go to one more place. His subordinates accepted his order and began to carry it out. At this point, when the owner was brought the news that all his spies had been killed, from such shocking news he ducked his tea reel and could not believe what had happened. The confusion was clear on his face. He asked for more details, and the messenger confirmed that the bodies had been found at the city wall. When the owner realized that misfortune lay ahead, he wondered, was Manchu really able to appear for me after all? And then outside his residence there were cries to kill everyone you meet on your way. Manchu and his army entered the residence of the town governor. They were already in the main hall, and Manchu gave a decisive order. No one was to be spared, no one was to be left alive. After Manchu met the town warden at the residence, a battle broke out between the two. The warden delivered his first rather crushing blow. Manchu, pulling out his sword, began parrying the town leader's blows. However, he barely managed to hold on. After that impact, a loud explosion sounded. The town governor was sure that there was almost nothing left of Manchu. However, Manchu still survived. Not a single scratch on him. He was annoyed that he couldn't go into the attack as soon as he was attacked. The town governor stood calmly and said that he was disappointed in Manchu and did not expect him to have so much courage in him to attack him. However, Manchu sprang into action, shouting, "It would be high time for me to take your place. You are already too old and stupid." The battle broke out between them again, and they began to exchange blows. The chief was surprised that their forces were almost equal. Then, as the battle progressed, he marveled at the fact that Manchu, being only at level 1, was already able to completely repel all of his attacks. The boss was beginning to realize that this was what it was all about, the power of the sword. However, Manchu still managed to miss one attack, which was quite strong. After this attack, he flew far away, crashing into the wall. He didn't expect that even with his current strength level, he could be thrown away like a piece of trash. Kneeling and catching his breath, he wondered, "How is this possible? I've been constantly improving all my characteristics." Fanesh realized that the answer was simple. He lacked power. And his weapon, which was only at level B, was now insufficient to match the strength of the town master. The town master himself wasted no time. The moment Manchu was resting, he decided to finish the fight and began to attack. Manchu began to shout, "Divine Sword, give me your power. I want to defeat my enemy." Fan was intrigued by this battle. He decided to honor the request, saying, "As you wish." With a snap of his fingers, he began to apply one of his techniques. With this technique, Manchu was easily able to repel the strike of the town master, who was stronger than him. The town leader recoiled and scrutinized Manchu, for he was now completely different. The town master himself was already exhausted, for the sword had sucked out his life energy in exchange for strength so that Manchu could destroy all of his enemies. Manchu began to attack the town master again with his new power. He used the Phantom Dance skill. The town leader reflected all the punches that Manchu threw countless times. However, the blows were getting closer and closer to the town master, and he could already sense the danger. As he stepped back a bit, he realized that he was in some sort of frenzy, and decided to run away and not continue the battle. Manchu, on the other hand, shouted, "You are running away, you miserable coward, and where will you flee from your estate?" The other looked at him in surprise. "That you dare call me a miserable coward? So how dare you?" Manchu once again used the Phantom Dance skill while the town master didn't expect it from him. It was only due to the suddenness of another acquired power that Manchu was able to completely pulverize the town master. using his channel to receive the Phantom Dance. He shattered him into small pieces. After the victory, an alert appeared saying, a level 3 warrior was killed. For this, Manchu received 300 evolution points, which implied that they received a lot more points for killing a level 3 warrior. However, these points were not enough, for he had expended energy far more than he had absorbed. Mongoose looked at his hand, which was devouring the sword, and shouted, "Blood! I need more blood, faster!" Confused, he asked, "And at night? Kill all your subordinates one by one, attacking from the back?" The subordinates started running, shouting, "The commander has gone mad! Run away, you fools! Those who want to live, run away!" Completely exhausted, he shouted, "The divine sword demands blood! Hurry, give me more blood, more blood!" However, he was unable to get the blood he needed, and the sword completely sucked out all of his life force and blood. Fang got an alert. The sword wielder's strength is low and you can get a random bonus. One of the men came and began to take the sword, saying, "This lowly man has become so powerful only because of the sword. Now I will take this sword and use its power." Fani at this moment wondered what kind of sword this cursed sword was. It seemed to him that this sword was designed only to get rid of weak owners. Later, the partner said, "Did you take that sword?" The moment he said that, a rock fell, which accidentally nailed Manchu. Now he too lay completely unconscious. A few more days passed, and a few people began to enter the residence of the town governor, where they were confronted with a horrible sight. A city of corpses, completely exsanguinated. But without looking back, they brought each body in. The guy with the headband noticed that they were all exsanguinated. The other guy asked, "Do you think someone practiced black magic here?" His master said, "Hey you there, what are you doing? Doing your work? Don't go looking at dead bodies for nothing and wasting your time." His master said, "These puppies only know how to shirk work and I pay them money for it." After that, a guy with a serious expression on his face walked up to the master and said, "Mentor uncle, according to the information we received from Zhao Gao, all of this could have been created by someone named Manghu." The master replied, "We arrived here a long time ago, but he never showed up. He's most likely in trouble and we need to rescue him." The gentleman ordered his servant to tell everyone to go in 2 by 2 if they detected danger and to signal at once. The servant accepted the order and assured him that all would follow these instructions. A few hours later, the subordinates said that they had found Manhu's body. The master and his subordinates came to see it. They discovered not only Manghu's body, but also Zhao Gao's body, which was completely disfigured by the past battle. The Lord ordered his subordinate to send someone who could take care of his former friend's body. He also pointed out that a new town governor would have to be elected in a few days so that the situation in Tanilang would remain calm. The subordinate humbly accepted all of his master's instructions. The regular workers were examining Manhu's body when their master approached them from behind and said, "Stand back, let me pass." Manchu too lay completely breathless. The Lord was surprised that even his corpse was not hanging on, as if devoid of any life or strength. He then concluded that Manchu was definitely practicing forbidden techniques and arts, and this was his undoing. The master gave orders to bury the bodies of Manghu and Zhao Gao, and to take away all the weapons in good condition. All the subordinates present accepted his new order. One of the guys was collecting swords and scored a sword that used to belong to Manchu. He walked over to examine the sword, and noticed that there was no trace of blood on it. Maybe it hadn't been used at all in this battle. He touched the sword, but it was so sharp that literally touching it completely cut his hand. The guy started to examine his wound, however. Fang tried to talk to him, asking, "Boy, do you want to find out who is better, you or the cursed sword?" The guy looked at his wound and said, "How is that even possible? I only touched it." After that, he suspected his comrade, saying, "Zhao, look, come here. Someone is suspicious." The one asked, "What is it? What do you want from me?" Pointing at the sacred blade, he uttered, "Look, this is no doubt not just a weapon. Something mysterious lurks in it." Pronounced, "It's just an ordinary sword. It's just that it's black, and they have many such weapons in their arsenal." The young man suggested, noticing that this blade is so sharp, as if it absorbs blood. I scratched myself, but there was still no drop of blood on the blade. Then the same guy asked, "Absorbs blood, you say?" A sinister smile appeared on his face, and he began to show interest in the sword that absorbed blood. A surprising discovery indeed. He slowly reached out his hand toward that cursed blade, eager to take possession of it. However, that guy took him by the shoulder and cautioned, "Zhang, I think it's best not to touch that sword. It might really be cursed." He takes his hand off his shoulder and says, "Come on, what's there to be afraid of? It's just an ordinary blade. We've seen over 100 of them." As he took the sword in his hand, something strange began to envelop him. Except he claimed it was just an ordinary blade. Ordinary, really? However, once he wielded this sword, he began to lose his mind. His mood and aura instantly changed. His comrade asked Zhang, "What's wrong with you? What happened to you?" I told you this sword was unusual. The one in turn smiled confidently and said, It's nothing like that. It's just a sword. We've met others, nothing special. His comrade asked, But how come? I thought it was special. Said they had enough. They should also take the rest of the weapons because they should hurry up. All these swords are quite valuable to their sect. Taking the sacred blade, he began to walk away from his comrade who suspected him of something. A sinister smile played on his face. He knew he had found the sacred blade, and it was a true treasure. After that, he leisurely started eating his food. Fang noticed that although he was a level 1 warrior, he was immune to the cursed sword. But while eating, the young man felt a great deal of pain. This intense pain was due to the fact that he had accidentally chipped his tooth. Fang realized that he was wrong, and the influence of this sword was still acting on him. Looking at her specs, Fani rejoiced, for after the last update, she finally had a card unlocked. Fan began to look ahead and saw a mountain in front of him. He was amazed at how magnificent and tall it was. The new swordmaster was walking forward, and a stranger wearing beautiful clothes approached him. Noticing him, the stranger said hello. Aren't you Chang Xiaoming? Hello. This guy had noticed that Chan had been walking around in an elevated mood lately, and he wondered what had happened in the meantime to change his mood so much. Chan answered him rather rudely. And you say that, wanting to spoil my mood. Go away from here, I don't want to talk to you. However, the guy put his hand on his shoulder and said, Well, we'll have a test soon. So assessing skills in the state you're in now is unlikely to pass. You'll have to possibly leave the clan. Chan indignantly replied, You don't know my abilities yet. You don't have to worry about me. Chan had already arrived at his destination. It was the arsenal, a majestic building with a stone gate. Shouts of Chao Xiaoming, Chao Xiaoming. The same guy asked Chan if he wanted to show that sword to the lord that he had found. As they got closer, the elder told them to leave everything they had. He would have lists later for record keeping. The young man replied that his partner need not worry. He would only set the baskets down and leave. They will be able to examine the contents of the baskets themselves. Putting the basket down, he went on to say that all baskets are thoroughly checked and examined. So in any case, this sword would not be left unattended. All necessary checks would be made. Leaving all the swords they had obtained on the battlefield, they quietly left. However, Zhang did not keep all the swords. He kept the sword he found most interesting because he knew that it was a divine sword that gave its user incredible power. Holding it in his hands, he began to speak to himself about the divine sword. Let me increase my strength. Let me use you. During these reflections, he was approached from behind and asked, Yan, did you take that sword for yourself, leaving it behind? His partner, Zhang, approached him and asked what he was doing here. He asked in surprise if he was following him. However, the partner replied that their mentor hadn't been out in public for a few days and sent him to look for Zhang. He was also worried because if he was found with the stolen sword, he would be punished. He offered to return the sword to him. However, Zhang heatedly shouted, This is none of your business. I will do as I please. You yourself are not my boss. His eyes were bloodshot, his rage clear in them, and it was clear he'd better not tell anyone about what he'd seen here. His friend began to pull away, being in a semi-shocked state, and said, I won't tell anyone. Don't worry, you can count on me. Pulling away from him, he continued his training. He tried to reassure his comrade to come back. Then he himself would explain everything to his mentor. His partner began to walk away quickly for fear of incurring his wrath. However, Zhang suspected that his partner might disobey, so he decided to watch what he would do. He started running and shouted that there was clearly something wrong with this sword. Zhang seemed out of it. He decided that he had to tell everyone about it, including his mentor. However, Zhang had anticipated this and went ahead of him, meeting him as he ran away. Looking at him point blank, he asked reproachfully, You're going to tell after all. You're going to do it, aren't you? You're going to tell our mentor about this sword? When his friend started to make excuses, claiming that he had noticed Zhang's mood change and was worried about it, Zhang wouldn't listen and stabbed him right in the neck. So the friend fell to the ground, holding his neck. Zhang went over and said that in that case he should die, for no one but he should know about it. His friend's eyes began to darken, repeating the name Xiao Ming in his last breaths. Zhang looked at him and felt no emotion, for he believed that his friend wanted to betray him. Later on, however, he began to regret killing one of his comrades. He stood with his bloody sword after seeing the breathless body of his comrade. He repeated, I killed my friend, Zhao Xie. Afterward, voices began to resound in his mind, claiming that the friend was his own fault, that he deserved his punishment, and that he should not have killed him. However, other thoughts crept into his mind, claiming that the friend wanted to reveal the secret about his divine sword, seeking his cruel punishment. He began to doubt the rightness of his actions and blamed himself. As a result, his mind was shaken and he began to reason that he must have made the right choice because traitors have no place in his entourage. Following the death of a friend under the blade of this sword, a mysterious soul and blood absorption began. The strange phenomenon earned 100 evolution points. Under the new overlord, the sword underwent a change and was named Shattering Shadow. Despite this, its level remained unchanged, still B. His gaze fell on the scene of the sword absorbing blood from his comrade's body. He noticed that similar incidents had happened before. Similar swords had always raised similar doubts. The next day on the training field, one of the sect heads spoke before the art test began. "I want to know where Zhao Shi is," he said. Many people began to discuss Zhao Shi's absence at the inspection. "Really, he's not here today. He was always so polite and punctual," they chatted. Meanwhile, our hero stood silently in place. The sect leader turned to Zhang, for Zhang was his close friend and seemed to know Zhao Shi better than anyone else. "Do you have any idea where he might have gone?" he asked. With a thoughtful look, Zhang replied, "No, I'm not sure where he might have gone. Perhaps something happened at his home and he had to come back." Then, when he turned to the sect leader, he lied, saying that Zhao Shi had previously mentioned to him about wanting to return home. But in fact, Zhao Shi was found completely unexplained, murdered and buried in the forest. He watched it all and was amazed. The new sword wielder did not show the slightest embarrassment, remaining perfectly calm and claiming that everything he said was a lie. His ability to lie so coldly was astonishing. The sect head became suspicious and questioned the possibility that Zhao might have gone home. He also noticed that Zhang had been absent from work for several days and threatened to expel him from the sect if it happened again. Zhang only nodded in agreement and said, "Yes, I am aware of the rules and am willing to follow them. I will be more careful in the future." The sect leader didn't like the answer, which seemed arrogant and unconvincing. The head of the sect said that since they still couldn't find the missing sect member, it was time to start the trials. It was decided to hold a sword fight to test the skills of the participants. A sect member approached Zhang and expressed surprise that he had been promoted to the second level. "Maybe you're not as weak as I assumed," he said. However, he invited Zhang not to seek false confidence in his abilities and said that even with the promotion to the second level, he couldn't match the experienced fighters. He claimed that the first place was unquestionably his. Zhang turned around with a sinister smile and said, "Let's see who reaches first place and who is stronger at the end." The battle began, and with one mighty blow he destroyed his opponent's sword. With no weapons, victory automatically rested with Zhang, for his defense was flawless. Everyone was amazed at the strength he always had, and he never told anyone about it. The guy that Zhang defeated noticed that it wasn't Zhang's own strength, but the influence of the sword. Walking up to Zhang, the guy said, "You're pretty good at the Tianqiang sword technique. Tell me, where did you get such a sword from?" Zhang answered the question by saying that he had purchased the sword at the fair for a token amount of money, almost for nothing. That young man said that the sword looked unusual at the fair from the mountain and asked to see it. Zhang replied that until he decided to part with it, the sword would not end up in the hands of a stranger. It belonged to him alone. The guy was increasingly sure that the secret was not Zhang practicing too hard, but the sword itself. And now the moment of the final fight had arrived. Zhang Shan and Zhang Xiaoming fought, and the winner would be rewarded with a bottle of medium-quality healing potion. Their fight broke out instantly. Blades crossed in a furious clash, filling the air with the energy of a passionate duel. After exchanging the first blows, they parted ways, rushing to different sides of the field, preparing to continue the bout. Zhang grinned and uttered, "Is that the best you can do? I expected my last opponent to be much stronger." Taking his sword, an awesome aura began to protrude from it, filling the surrounding space. Amidst the realization, he noticed that the sword, when in the hands of someone who is dominated by evil, diminishes its darker attributes. In the case of a sword belonging to a good person, it radiates goodness, and the sword's attributes become lighter. Looking at the aura of the sword, he realized that until now there was no owner with such light attributes. While he pondered, the battle raged with more fury as Zhang landed powerful blows one after another, fully dedicated to the battle. His opponent was barely holding back all the punches Zhang was aiming at him. The final blow sent his opponent flying almost to the edge of the practice area. He noticed that some kind of corrosive substance had begun to act on his hands, causing sharp pain. He saw another attack coming toward him and thought, "This is the end of my life." With another strike, Zhang knocked the sword out of his opponent's hands. He barely escaped a fatal blow. The sword flew far enough away from its master, denying him the opportunity to pick it up and continue the battle. Both the sword and the opponent's hands began to be affected by the aura's destructive effects. Zhang Xiaoming thrust his sword into his opponent's chest, and the referee decisively declared him the winner. As he approached him, the sect leader noted Zhang's progress and expressed his willingness to recommend him for the next hunting competition. Zhang was overjoyed at this news and thanked his mentor Feng, bowing before him. His joy was fierce, for hunting provided a great opportunity to gain evolution points by hunting beasts. Feng carefully studied the system alert and realized that he was exactly 100 points short of evolving into a Class A weapon. Fan realized that many level 6 warriors already possessed more powerful weapons. He realized that over time, this sword would eventually become a burden to whoever used it, and would become less effective compared to more modern variants. He was interested in what Zhang would do when his sword reached the ultimate level of development. It had been over 2 months since the competition. One of the men told Zhang that today's business would be up to him. He would be leading the hunt. Zhang smiled and replied, "Yes, I'll try not to let you down." Fang rejoiced, for after 2 months of downtime, they could finally start earning skill points and move forward, improving. A man from the same sect stood behind him, watching Zhang intently. There were a lot of people around who had come to hunt. Our hero was given the number 101. 3 people came out in front of the audience and ordered silence, saying they would be explaining the rules. He thought they were the organizers of the event. A bald man with a scar announced that everything was ready for the start of the annual monster hunting competition. There are 143 participants in the competition, and the top 20 will be able to become inner disciples by going to the top of the mountain. The grade will depend on the ranking of crystals obtained from the monsters killed. Zhang was overjoyed, as he could now safely aim for first place. Feng was also happy, as killing monsters would give him more evolution points. The bald man ordered everyone to move forward into the forest where the wild python lived. The young men began discussing why the forest was named Wild Python Forest. It turns out there are as many as 6 giant, dangerous pythons living there. It's dangerous game, and they warned each other not to go too deep into the forest if they wanted to save their lives. He said that these people don't understand anything, as it is impossible to mine high-quality crystals without going deep into the forest. He emphasized that the main objective of the game was to mine as many crystals as possible, which required fighting stronger opponents. Fan was also in agreement with this, as this way one could kill more monsters and earn more points. As Zhang was heading into the forest, a guy with long hair approached him and offered to team up with him. Zhang refused, and Feng was upset that he was seen as weak and unable to work as a team. This guy asked why don't they get more results working together. They refused together because Fan thought the others were too stupid to work together, and Zhang thought they were too weak. Disappointed, they asked who these people were to reject their offer so forcefully when the competition had not yet begun. One of them suggested being more cautious and teaming up to survive. Zhang activated his Fury skill, surrounding himself with an ominous aura, showing everyone that he didn't need the help of anyone. They looked at him apprehensively, presumably wondering, maybe really you'd better go alone. He turned around and pronounced, "You are trash, you will only get in my way. Get out of my way if you don't want to die before the competition starts." The bald man decided to lead everyone else into the forest after noticing Zhang's behavior. He noted that there seemed to be some pretty exciting newcomers here. He warned that everyone should be prepared to enter the wild python forest and that everyone should stay alert. Each of the students was given a backpack and told not to lose it in Janu. One was also given out. A man with a beard started asking if everyone had gotten a backpack. After all, this backpack is unusual and special. It is specially designed to hold crystals during the competition. Then he began to explain the rules. All the disciples only have 1 day of time, and for these top-level crystals, the disciples would be rewarded with a special one from the elders. Fang rejoiced, for the real battle would finally begin. He had been waiting for this for so long. Here was the start of the competition. Zhang ran alone deep into the forest. Some students began to bunch up and explore the not-so-deep places in the woods to keep themselves alive. Some, however, were less confident and examined every bush and tree with care. There were also stronger guys who also went on their own to get more crystals. One of the assistant organizers approached the bald man and asked if everything was okay now. The man stated that it didn't matter how things went. They were just ordinary students. They were about to have a lot on their plate. Smiling evilly, he said that until this monster appeared, all losses would be meaningless. After all, in order for a bald man to reach level 6, he would need the crystal of this ferocious monster. He, like Zhang, had the sole purpose of evolving to become stronger. They were both consumed by this goal. This ferocious beast was a strange serpent that dwelt deep in the forest.